Hi, I'm Trinity Vandenacre, and this is Life in the West. Today I'm doing part 2 of my A.B. Cook series. And A.B. Cook, he was one of the major influencers of Montana. He had his hands in everything. He was the friend of governors. He was in the paper all the time for his exploits. It seemed like everything he did turned to gold. In part 1, we looked at, did he get his money legitimately? Because there was an accusation by some later on in history. There was a speculation that he was working with a copper king named Clark and got most of his money because he was kind of a henchman and was involved in bribery and other things. Now, we covered that in part 1. If you want to watch that, make sure you click on it here or in the description. But now we're going to part 2. And here's the question we're asking today. Are fortunes really made by just happening to be in the right place in the right time? A.B. Cook is a perfect example of someone who came to the West with nothing but the intelligence in his brain and the ideas and gumption he had as a young man. We're going to walk through how he started building a fortune that to this day people look back on with envy and see, was it all just chance? First thing that Cook did when he arrived in Montana at the age of 19, it was 1883. He took a job as a clerk at a grocery store in Billings. I believe that he knew Montana was going to grow, or at least he thought that Montana was going to grow, and that would lead to opportunities that he could take advantage of for his personal gain. Young Andy Cook was not looking to be a grocer all of his life. But instead of waiting around to see what's going to happen, he went straight to work. So when a man in Billings offered him a job on a survey crew that was surveying the land on the Crow Reservation, he jumped at the chance. His start was meager. I mean, his first job was to manage a mule team and a wagon, transporting goods between camps in the survey area. And it wasn't long before he was pushed way out of his comfort zone. His first job was to go to town and get a load of supplies and bring them back to camp. When arriving back in camp, the boss told him he needed to take these supplies to a different survey camp across the border into Wyoming. Upon telling the boss that he had no idea where the camp was or how to get there, the boss sternly said, "You can't miss it, just head south." Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have been told you can't miss it a few times, and I've actually used that term once or twice. Every time has not worked out the best. I can't imagine headed off across the prairie in Montana, this is right near the Custer battlefield, hoping against hope that you actually find the camp you're headed towards. One of the things that Cook was good at was learning to learn. You know, in business, sometimes people think that they're at the end of learning. In business, you're always learning, and you need to continue learning to stay at the top of your industry and your game. Never think you have it all figured out. The first obstacle he ran into when he headed south to this camp that was supposedly down there was high water in all of the streams that he was supposed to cross. They were bank full. And this is something that us living in the West, we understand. Certain times of the year when the runoff is heavy and during the summer, the snow starts to melt during the day up high on the mountains of the West. That causes the stream levels to rise greatly by afternoon, mid-morning to afternoon and evening. But then as it cools down at night, all throughout the night, the level of the stream drops back down. Well, he discovered this on his own and figured out that if he waited until right at dawn, the stream was as low as it was going to get. So he would cross all the streams at that time. That course takes a little longer to get where you're going, but it makes it so you don't lose the load or the wagon, which would, number one, cause to be a failed mission, number two, possibly lose his job. Well, he luckily found the camp across the border in Wyoming and made it successfully back to his original camp. Due to this minor success, the boss saw something in him he liked, and he immediately promoted him to chainman, and then to rodman, and then on the instruments. Now, this is a surveying crew. The surveyors back then were creating section lines. So what they had was a chain, and they made this chain 66 feet long, 100 links, and each link was a bar with a loop on each end that connected to the next link. These links were 7.92 inches long. Well, those section lines that they marked out, now they did it over in the Crow Reservation, but all over this country there were surveyors using those chains and instruments to mark out on maps section lines, and then they would drive in a big pin that marked the section corners, and then quarter section and half sections. We still use those sections today to define where property boundaries are between us and the neighbor, and us and the Forest Service, and us and the BLM. All of our property boundaries today are defined by the section markers that they laid out back then. A section is 1 mile square. So how that figures out is exactly 80 chains is 1 mile. So you would run 80 chains in a direction, and if you wanted to go that direction for a mile, you would go 80 chains west, and then 80 chains south, and 80 chains back to the east, and your corners should meet. That was one section. That is what Cook did when he started in this business. He started as a surveyor. Well, Cook worked hard on that crew, and after that job was done, he took a new job as a surveyor for the Northern Pacific Railroad. This is a success trait that we see Cook use often, and that is being willing to go where the opportunity leads. Many people say they want this opportunity so bad, but when that opportunity leads them where they don't want to go, say 400 miles that way, they aren't willing to go where that opportunity is. Cook always was. This railroad right here, in fact, runs right beside land that used to belong to A.B. Cook. I don't believe this is one that he laid down himself or that he contracted, but this side right here used to belong to Cook. Actually, I believe both sides used to belong to Cook.
There's an article that I found written in 1885 that talks about Cook when he was 21 years of age, and he first came to Butte on a survey crew for the railroad. And it says in this paper, last night's train brought to the Centennial Hotel a party of railroad men consisting of a bunch of people here, including A.B. Cook. Just what their business here may be is not known, as the members of the party are not at all communicative. Their baggage is all marked on tags of Northern Pacific Construction Department and consists of all manner of articles suited for camping out, including 3 or 4 large rolls of bedding besides a carpenter's chest and trunks. A gentleman from Helena who saw the party over there says that they were surveyors and that they are here for the purpose of looking out a railroad route belonging to the Northern Pacific. It is nothing more than natural that they be put down as being here for the purpose of surveying a line between this city and connecting point on the main line, and the chances are that such is their business. You may find this interesting, but anymore, these kind of details aren't usually in a newspaper. But due to the way that they wrote newspapers back then, we can even follow the life of Cook before he became kind of a public figure. It may seem odd to you that they put these kind of details in the paper, but when you read these newspapers, they often put who everybody was. They list the names of every single person that stayed in a hotel for that night in that town, and then guests at their business. I'm reminded of something that Louis L'Amour once said, that the West is really huge in size, but it had so few people that you really couldn't hide in it. Everybody or someone always knew what you were doing. This is evidenced of that in the paper, and it does help us to figure out kind of a little bit of storyline for what Cook did, because he was always traveling. So they always mentioned what town he was in, and it helps to put a little bit of a picture together even before he became a big player in Montana. So after surveying this railroad line between Butte and Helena, he was actually put in charge of the construction of it by the company who was building that railroad.
So because of these experiences, Cook learned some very valuable lessons to him. He learned how to grade and create a railroad. And he also learned how to manage men at the same time. This was an education that he was getting paid for while he learned it. And he would put that education to work in major ways throughout the rest of his life.
And now we come upon another trait that I believe really contributed to the success of Cook, and that is his ability to stand risk. After managing a few projects for this company out of Helena that built railroads in both here and in Canada, he then took the leap. Instead of staying where he was and managing more and more projects, he took the leap, starting his own railroad construction company. That's definitely a risk, and it's the kind of man that Cook was, and enabled him to take one more step towards his fortune. So it was at this point that Cook really stepped out on his own for really the first time we see. And talking to his direct descendants, his only surviving two relatives, they were telling me that there's some letters, some correspondence between him and his family, his sister especially, Cook's sister, A.B. Cook's sister. And it sounds like at that time he was looking for investing, and his family actually helped him by investing in his new venture. At the time, he was obviously making quite a bit of money managing these large projects, and he took his money and most likely the money that was invested by his family, possibly others, and he put it into three new things. First, he started buying land right around the town of Missoula, and it was land that he obviously knew what the town would have to grow into. The second thing he did was became partners in a mining operation near Thompson Falls and became the manager of a mine next to it. Probably that's how he got into that one. And then the third thing was he started a railroad construction company of his own. This put him really in all three of the major money-making industries of Montana at the time. He didn't only put his money in one basket, as you can see. He put his money in three of the major playing baskets. You do have to take into consideration that at this time, Montana was booming. He saw this. The growth causes opportunity. Either growth or contraction cause opportunity. And Cook just had the mindset of these are the areas that are needed to grow the most and the most potential for profit. I'm willing to take risk, therefore I'm going to put my money and time and energy into these three baskets. That's what he did. So we pick up Cook's story again in 1890 when he's 26 years old. Now he's got many years of experience managing men, managing money, managing large operations, and that's what he really puts to work for himself. He's now selling some of the property in Missoula and reinvesting that money in more property. In fact, here's an article, not really an article, but a clipping out of a newspaper that I found where he purchased a piece of property, a quarter section, for $4,000 and then sold it for $10,000 in the same period before they published that newspaper. So a very short period of time. Now that's what I call buying low and selling high. I don't know if any of you have tried that. It's more difficult than it sounds. he was obviously very good at that. One thing Cook also was good at was realizing that he needed the help of other people. And every one of his businesses, his real estate venture in Missoula, his mining operation, and even his railroad construction company called Cook, Deeks, and Hines, he formed partnerships with people who could help him move forward with his dreams. And obviously, maybe not obviously, but to me, it very much seems like they were the financial backers of these businesses, and he was the face and the worker of them. Because if you look through the newspaper articles, it's always about A.B. Cook purchased this, A.B. Cook, but the name of the company was Cook, Deeks, and Hines, for instance. So he was in partnerships with these people, and that's what leads me to believe they were the money of the operation, and he was the brains and the get-her-done of the operation. So was it mere chance? Was his fortune mere chance? As we see from going through this, I don't think so. When we look back on something, it's easy to say, oh, well, he was just in the right place at the right time. But that's because we're looking back. Part of the reason that I feel, and this is just my opinion, part of the reason I feel that these articles like this are written like, everything fell in his lap. This was all by chance. It just happened to stumble into this fortune. I think looking back, people don't like to attribute it to the man's intelligence and his abilities, because that means that we don't have those abilities. And if we say that it's luck, then it makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves. That's a little deeper subject, but I really feel that you need to really understand who you are and be okay with who you are, and not try to put yourself up against somebody like Cook and say, oh, we can't compare to him. Or another way to do that is to say, bring Cook down and say, oh, he was just lucky. For instance, when we look back on Cook, we can follow the path of his life right back to the mule skinner days, right back through what we've just talked about, all of his companies. And it looks very clear cut, like, oh, one just follows the next. But that's not so simple when you're looking forward, is it? It's very hard to tell the future. Like these paths are not like, oh yeah, this path is very obvious and this is the one I should take, and not this one. Those forks don't become clear until after everything has happened. If COVID-19 has not taught us anything else, it has definitely taught us that we can't trust in the path of the future, that we know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. So when you look at these things and you say, was this mere chance? Did it just happen to luckily fall into this and luckily fall into that? You have to go backwards and put yourself in his shoes. At any point in time, he could have changed this course, and most people would have. There was people there with him on that survey crew. What did they do? They probably continued on surveying. There was people with him in that construction of railroad. What did they do? Other managers. What did they do? Well, they most likely continued managing railroad projects. Cook made choices, and the choices he made were often ones that we won't make because they involve a lot of risk, a lot of adventure, a lot of change in our lives. And that's what really, truly, I believe, led him to his fortune. I don't agree that this was mere chance, even though looking back, very easy to say. There were several factors that helped him out here, and I will mention them right now. Number one, he did not have a wife or children all through this time period. So until way later, he could take these risks, and if he failed, they landed right back on him, and it didn't affect a wife and kids sitting at home. That enables you to take more risk, but that's a choice that a lot of us, especially me, we're not willing to take at his age. So that's it for how Cook got his start. Was it mere chance? I don't think so. So you're not going to want to miss next week, because next week I finally have the clearance, the permission that I need to show you something very special that has to do with Cook's life. And it's really something that I want to bring you into something to show you kind of who he was and how he did things later in life, what he used his fortune to do, because his dream wasn't in railroad, it was in cattle. So make sure you find my page, Life in the West, and hit that like button, hit that follow button, or go on to YouTube if you're not on there already and hit subscribe and hit that bell so you're notified when I share with you this special episode next week.